Maddie.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great.
How's teaching going?
It's going pretty good. How's teaching going for you?
It's fine, different.
Different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looks kind of empty in here.
Yeah, feels that way too. A lot of fun projects got put on hold.
Yeah. But I think there's something we can do.
Yeah?
Yeah. You're going to love this.
All right. Hi, my name's Matthew Kreider, and I'm on the theater faculty at Murray State University.
Hi, I'm Maddie Brasher-Evans. I'm a high school teacher. I teach history and drama.
And theater is obviously facing a challenge at the moment. And though we do see a light at the end of the tunnel, there's no denying that we miss the feel of having a full house and a big, huge show.
Yeah, but we're not just going to sit around and wait. We love theater too much. We have to do something.
And not just something for us, something that maybe can help others, something to help kindle that joy of theater. And for me, that means Shakespeare.
I'm sure I heard a groan there.
Yeah.
Every high school history or English teacher knows the Shakespeare groan. As soon as students hear that we're going to be reading Shakespeare, they groan. Why do we have to learn Shakespeare? It's so complicated. Why does he use so many words? Ugh. That's the groan I'm talking about.
And people point to the language as being the tricky part, as if Shakespeare was writing in a different language. And yes, there are occasionally some words that are not familiar to us, but I dare you, at some point, get the speech, the to be or not to be speech, and take it out of grammar order and just mix the words up and put them in alphabetical order. I bet you'll know most of the words. So it's not just language that's messing with us. And yes, sometimes Shakespeare changes the order of words. But I say if we can understand Yoda, we can understand Shakespeare. So it's something beyond that, and I personally think it's a culture gap. There's a culture gap between now and the several hundred years since Shakespeare wrote it. And I think that's something we can address. That's something we can help perhaps explain to make Shakespeare a little bit more accessible. What was Shakespeare's worldview? What was life like in that Elizabethan era? And Shakespeare has one speech that discusses the entirety of human life. You may have heard the first line before, all the world's a stage. And in that speech, Shakespeare says that man goes through 7 ages of his life. So let's take a look at those ages and see what we can learn about Shakespeare's time and perhaps make Shakespeare a little bit more understandable to us all.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. One man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And then, the whining schoolboy with his satchel and his shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. And then the soldier, full of strange oaths, bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, good capon lined, with eye severe, beard of formal cuts, full of why saws and modern instances. So he plays his part. The 6th stage shifts to the lean and slippered pantaloon with spectacles on nose, pouch on side. His youthful hose, well saved, the world too wide for his shrunk shank. and his big, manly voice turns again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in its sound. The last scene of all in this strange, eventful history is a second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
So I think there's a trap in reading Shakespeare's plays, and it comes from the formality of the language and thinking that because the language is formal, the characters are formal. There's the idea that the whole thing is supposed to sound like this grand presentation speech.
Well, and Shakespeare uses 10 words to say something that he could have said in 2.
Yeah, and 10 of those words, 3 of them he would have made up himself.
Absolutely.
On top of that, we have iambic pentameter, that crazy, it's 10 syllables, weak stress, strong stress, ba-dum, 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 as if the characters are supposed to be a metronome. But the pentameter is just there to give us a flow, a feel to the language.
Iambic pentameter is important, and it shows off Shakespeare's beastly writing skills, but it is not the most important part of Shakespeare. It's the part people kind of get caught up on and confused with. What is more important in Shakespeare is these characters. These characters, these human beings that he's telling a story about.
Yeah, and to connect that to the meter, Shakespeare doesn't always use a perfect iambic line. In fact, a lot of the times he breaks it. If you look again at that to be or not to be speech, Hamlet very rarely in that entire speech has a perfect iambic line. And we're seeing that because Hamlet's kind of losing it. He's losing his ability to have a good, clean flow. So what really matters is looking at the culture behind these characters, to have them be actual living beings.
I agree. But I think what made Shakespeare so transcendent is these characters, these human beings, these real life people. And if you treat these people as real people and not these big characters with these flowery words, then there's a human nature at its point.
And if you ignore that, if you let yourself look at Shakespeare as just structure, just meter and language and fancy words, then the characters become very bizarre. And here's what I think it looks like when people read Shakespeare and only focus on the structure and not the human beings. Let's take a look.
Nurse, where's my daughter? Call her forth to me.
Now by my maiden head, at 12-year-old, I bade her come. What lamb? What lady bird? God forbid, where's this girl? What, Juliet?
How now? Who calls?
Your mother.
Madam, I am here. What is your will? This is the matter. Nurse, come back again. Thou knowest my daughter is of a pretty age.
Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour.
She's not 14.
How long is it now to Lammas tide?
A fortnight and odd days.
Come Lammas eve at night shall she be 14.
So there you have it. That's, to me, ridiculous Shakespeare. That's what it looks like when you stress the rhythm and you stress structure and think everyone is just this formal person. Oh, probably also with a British accent, because you have to have a British accent if you're doing Shakespeare. No. Let's take a look at what happens if we treat these characters as actual human beings. And there is diversity there. I mean, Lady Capulet is formal. She's a lady. But the nurse, she's a little more fun. And Juliet's just a teenager. Let's take a look.
Nurse, where's my daughter? Call her forth to me.
Now by my maidenhead at 12-year-old I bade her come. What lamb? What ladybird? God forbid, where's this girl? What, Juliet?
How now? Who calls?
Your mother.
Madam, I am here. What is your will? This is the matter. Nurse, come back again. Thou knowest my daughter is of a pretty age.
Oh, Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour.
She's not 14.
How long is it now to Lammas tide?
A fortnight and odd days.
Come Lammas eve at night shall she be 14.
Now see, that makes more sense to me. That's interesting. Those are human characters. So now let's take a look at the human characters of Shakespeare and what the world was like for them. So, Maddie, what's going on in this scene?
Well, I think the thing that is the hardest for people to understand about this scene is the relationship between Lady Capulet and her daughter Juliet. We are so used to seeing these mothers in our society that are proud to be mothers, and Lady Capulet is just not that. She's not warm. She's kind of cold and distant from her child.
Yeah, she absolutely seems cold, as if it's someone else's child.
Yeah, she doesn't know how to talk to her daughter. She literally has to bring the nurse back in so that the nurse can help her talk to her. But we look at her as this cold, uncaring woman, when really in the 16th century, she would have been considered pretty normal. She's a lady. She's formal. So maybe she would have been considered a good mother in Shakespeare's time.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay. Maybe we would consider her a decent mother. She would have been considered okay, but she's a woman of noble birth, and women of noble birth aren't encouraged to have a strong bond with their children at this time. You have to remember that women give up one of the most sacred acts of motherhood that we know, breastfeeding, and they give it up to another woman, a woman of more common birth.
And that's the norm, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It would have been considered unclean for a woman of noble birth to do it, so they pick a woman of lesser standing. And I think that when you bring the nurse in and you see this loud, fun, caring woman, Lady Capulet just kind of pales in comparison.
And if I remember correctly, at the time, a nursemaid would be selected because they'd had a child at around the same time as the noble child was born, so that they would both go through nursing together. And we see that in this scene, that the nurse references her own daughter that had unfortunately died very young. So in that token, we can also look at the relationship between the nurse and Juliet, as Juliet being a surrogate child for the one the nurse lost.
Oh, I agree completely. But I could also argue that one of the reasons Lady Capulet doesn't get close to her daughter is a lot of children died in infancy during this time. So maybe Lady Capulet didn't bond to her daughter because she was scared she would die in childhood.
And this brings up an interesting point. In this scene, you're going to see, kind of offhanded, Lady Capulet gives a hard number to her own age. And that's something we don't see very often in Shakespeare, getting an exact number. We know that she says Juliet is about to turn 14, and Lady Capulet was younger than that when she had Juliet, which means Lady Capulet at most is 27.
Exactly. And can you imagine a 12 or 13-year-old girl having a baby when you're still a child yourself?
And that's going to be a theme throughout all the scenes you see here, that age is a little bit different in Shakespeare's time, and they're going to think about it in different ways. I mean, we're talking about a 12-year-old child potentially having a child of their own.
Oh, absolutely, and especially when you're talking about nobility. You see, nobility sometimes married a lot younger because they're trying to carry on a name or a title. This class distinction matters a lot, because the nurse is allowed to say a lot of things that Lady Capulet could never get away with saying. And that's because the nurse is a commoner.
So I guess it really isn't that unusual that Lady Capulet and the nurse have a very different relationship with Juliet.
No.
So let's take a look.
Nurse, where's my daughter? Call her forth to me.
Now by my maidenhead 12-year-old I bade her come. What lamb? What ladybird? God forbid, where's this girl? What, Juliet?
How now? Who calls?
Your mother.
Madam, I am here. What is your will?
This is the matter. Nurse, come back again. Thou knowest my daughter is of a pretty age.
Oh, Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour.
She's not 14.
How long is it now to Lammas tide?
A fortnight and odd days.
Come Lammas eve at night shall she be 14. Susan and she, God rest all Christian souls, were of an age. Well, Susan is with God, she was too good for me. But as I said, come Lammas eve at night shall she be 14. That shall she, Mary, I remember it well. 'Tis since the earthquake now 11 years since she was weaned. Oh, I never shall forget it. Of all the days of the year upon that day.
Enough of this, I pray thee hold thy peace.
And stint thou too, I pray thee, nurse, say I.
Peace, I have done. God mark thee to his grace. Thou wast the prettiest babe that e'er I nursed. And I might live to see thee married once, I have my wish.
Mary. That Mary is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married?
It is an honor that I dream not of.
An honor? Were not I thine only nurse, I would say thou hast sucked wisdom from thy teat.
Well, think of marriage now. Younger than you here in Verona, ladies of esteem are made already mothers. By my count, I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid. Thus then, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love.
A man, young lady. Oh, lady, such a man is all the world. Why, he's a man of wax.
Verona's summer hath not such a flower.
Nay, he's a flower, in faith a very flower.
What say you? Can you love the gentleman? So shall you share all that he doth possess by having him making yourself no less.
No less, nay, bigger. Oh, women grow by men.
Speak briefly. Can you like of Paris's love? This night you shall behold him at our feast.
I'll look to like, if looking liking move, but no more deep lying dart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly.
Oh, go girl, seek happy nights to happy days.
There is a clear level of education that Edward V displays, despite the fact that he's only around 12 years old during this time. And the words he uses are really eloquent, and he shows this knowledge of battle already.
He seems to be prepared to discuss military strategy, or more so military history, and he has grand plans. He wants to reclaim his rights in France. He has noble ambition.
Well, and if you think about it, Edward has been away from his family, his core family members, since he was about 3 years old. Most of the time, whenever a prince is born, a crowned prince, they're sent away to another place to keep them from getting sick. So he starts building his own household at 3 years old and being educated by other men on how to be a man. And their idea of a man and a great leader most of the time is being a great soldier.
There's an interesting moment you're going to see in this scene when his brother shows up. And because they've been sent away, his brother York will kind of feel things out and say, hey, who is this brother that I haven't seen in so long and is now, crown prince?
And there's a significant age difference between the two. York is not Edward IV's son. He is not a prince. But Edward V is the crowned prince. And you can see there's a level of respect that York gives to his younger brother. And it's different. York doesn't get that same respect. Richard doesn't get that same respect. Richard's a prince, but he's a third son. So his upbringing really would have been different than Edward's.
What would the difference of education be between the two young princes?
Well, the difference of education would mostly be that Edward is going to be trained in select subjects. Select subjects like history or military strategy or maybe a little bit of Latin. But he is being trained to be a king. He is being trained to lead a country. Whereas a second or third son, like Richard, they are going to look at other things. They're going to be pushed into positions in the military or even the clergy. I don't know if you knew this, but Henry VIII actually was the second-born prince, and he was being trained to be a priest. So it's this idea that the only way that you can have significance in this community is if you're either a prince or a military leader or a part of the clergy.
So they probably wouldn't have a whole lot of use for math and science.
Oh no, he probably actually would have been really culturally distant. There would have been a strict line of what Edward needed to know.
We're also in this scene going to see education used essentially as a weapon or a means of control, that the way the two young princes are educated is very, very different. And Richard sees that as a threat, that one prince is very clearly his mother's son, and that upbringing has brought him to see Richard as an enemy, and he's a lot smarter than Richard gave him credit for at first.
I really think that in this scene what Richard is doing is sizing his nephew up, seeing how much he knows, what he knows really. He needs to know how he can use Edward's education to best be able to manipulate him. He's just sizing him up.
Let's see how that pans out.
Welcome, dear cousin. My thoughts sovereign. The weary way hath made you melancholy.
No, uncle, but our cross on the way have made it tedious, wearisome, and heavy. I want more uncles here to welcome me.
Sweet prince, the untainted virtue of your years hath not yet dived into the world's deceit. Those uncles which you want were dangerous. Your grace attended to their sugared words, but looked not on the poison of their hearts. God keep you from them, and from such false friends.
God keep me from false friends, but they were none. Say, Uncle Gloucester, if our brother come, where should we sojourn till our coronation?
Where it seems best unto your royal self. If I may counsel you, some day or two your highness shall repose you at the Tower, then where you please, and be thought most fit for your best health and recreation.
I do not like the Tower of any place. Did Julius Caesar build that place, my lord?
He did, my gracious lord, begin that place, which since succeeding ages have re-edified.
Is it upon record or else reported successively from age to age? He built it.
Upon record, my gracious lord.
But say, my lord, it were not registered. Methinks the truth should live from age to age, as to retell to all posterity, even to the general all-ending day.
So wise, so young, they say do never live long.
What say you, uncle?
I say, without characters, fame lives long.
That Julius Caesar was a famous man. With what his valor did enrich his wit set down to make his valor live. Death makes no conquest of this conqueror, for now he lives in fame, though not in life. And if I live until I be a man, or win our ancient right in France again, or die a soldier as I lived a king.
Now in good time. Oh, here comes the Duke of York.
Richard of York, how fair is our loving brother?
Well, my dread lord, so must I call you now.
Aye, brother, to our grief as it is yours. Too late he died that might have kept that title, which by his death hath lost much majesty.
How fares our loving cousin, noble Lord of York?
I thank you, gentle uncle. Oh, my lord, you said that idle weeds are fast in growth, and therefore is he idle?
Oh, my fair cousin, I must not say so.
I pray you, uncle, give me this dagger.
My dagger, little cousin. With all my heart.
A beggar, brother?
Of my kind uncle, who I know will give, and being but a toy which is no grief to give.
A greater gift than that I'll give my cousin.
A greater gift? Oh, that's the sword to it.
Aye, gentle cousin, were it light enough.
Oh, then I see you will part with but light gifts. In weightier things you'll say a beggar nay.
It is too heavy for your grace to wear.
I weigh it lightly were it heavier.
What? Would you have my weapon, little lord?
I would, that I might thank you as you call me.
How?
Little.
My lord of York will still be cross in talk. Uncle, your grace knows how to bear with him.
You mean to bear me, not to bear with me. Uncle, my brother mocks both you and me because that I am little, like an ape. He thinks that you should bear me on your shoulders.
So cunning, so young is wonderful. No doubt, no doubt. Oh, 'tis a perilous boy. Bold, quick, ingenious, forward, capable. He is all the mother's, from the top to toe.
Of course, education wasn't just reserved for the nobility, for the royal family. Academic life did have a place in Shakespeare's time. In fact, it wasn't uncommon for a wealthy businessman to send their son off to school.
No, if they're going to be wealthy businessmen in their future, they need some education. So the idea is, if you're not going to inherit a title, they needed to be able to do something. So they might run a business or join the priesthood or join the military.
So it did exist. Sending your son off to school was something that did happen, if only just to keep you out of trouble. We're going to see that immediately in Taming of the Shrew. Right at the beginning, Lucentio arrives in Padua with the idea of beginning a grand course of academic study. And he's very excited about learning and great education. And his servant Tranio is a little bit nervous about that because he kind of just wants to party. Let's see how that happens, how that works its way out when they arrive.
Tranio, since for the great desire I had to see fair Padua, nursery of arts, I'm arrived for fruitful Lombardy, the pleasant garden of great Italy, and by my father's love and leave him are with his good will and thy good company, my trusty servant, well approved in all. Here let us breathe and happily institute a course of learning and ingenious study. Pisa, renowned for its grave citizens, gave me my being and my father first. Merchant of great traffic through the world, Vincentio, come of the Bentivogli. Vincentio's son, brought up in Florence. It shall become to serve all hopes conceived, to deck his fortune with his virtuous deeds. And therefore, Tranio, for the time I study virtue in that part of philosophy, that I apply the trees of happiness by virtue specially to be achieved. Tell me thy mind, for I have Pisa left, and unto Padua come, as he that leaves his shallow plash to plunge him in the deep, and with satiety seeks to quench his thirst.
Me, pardinato, gentle mastermind. Why, I am, and all affected as yourself, glad that you thus continue your resolve to suck the sweets of sweet philosophy. Only, good master, while we do admire this virtue and this moral discipline, let's be no Stoics nor no Stocks, I pray, or so devote to Aristotle's checks as Ovid be outclassed quite abjured. Buck logic with acquaintance that you have. Practice rhetoric in your common talk. The music and poesia used to quicken you. The mathematics and metaphysics, fall to them as you find your stomach serves you. No profit grows, whereas no pleasure tan. In brief, sir, study what you most affect.
Gramercies, Tranio, well dost thou advise. If, Biondello, thou wert come ashore, we could at once put us in readiness and find lodging fit to entertain such time as friends as Badger shall beget.
Fortunately for Tranio, that academic attitude didn't last very long. He was worried about having to be stuck in a library 12 hours a day and sleeping in a monastery, but that ambition fades pretty quickly.
What happened?
Her.
I pray, sir, tell me, is it possible that love should of a sudden take such hold?
Tranio, till I found it to be true, I never thought it possible or likely. But see, while idly I stood looking on, I found the effect of love in idleness. And now in plainness do confess thee that which art secret and as dear to me as unto the Queen of Carthage was. Tranio, I burn, I pine, I perish, Tranio, if I achieve not this gentle young girl. Counsel me, Tranio, for I know thou canst. Assist me, Tranio, for I know thou wilt.
Master, you look so longly on the maid, perhaps you mark not what's the pith of all?
Oh, yes. I saw sweet beauty on her face, such as the daughter of Agenor had. It made great Jove to humble him to her hand, and with his knee he kissed the Cretan strand.
Saw you no more? Marked you not how her sister began to scold and raise up such a storm that mortal ears might hardly endure the din?
Tranio, I saw her core lips to move, and with her breath she did perfume the air. Sacred and sweet was all I saw in her.
Navin, 'tis time to start from his trance. I pray awake, sir. If you love the maid, then thoughts and wits to achieve her.
Basta, content thee, for I have it full. We've not yet been seen in any house, nor can we be distinguished by our faces for man or master. Then it follows thus: thou shalt be Master Tranio in my stead. Keep house and port and servants as I should. I will some other be, some Florentine, some Neapolitan, or meaner man of Pisa. 'Tis hatched, and shall be so.
So had you need? In brief, sir, sit that your pleasure is, and I am tied to be obedient. For so your father charged us at our parting, be serviceable to my son, quoth he. Although I think 'twas in another sense, I am content to be Lucentio, because so well I love Lucentio.
Be so, Tranio, for Lucentio loves. And let me be a slave to achieve that maid whose sudden sight hath thralled my wounded eye.
So we see a lot of lovers in Shakespeare's plays.
I really can't count the time that students have asked me, why does Shakespeare have so many lovers? Why does he always have to have a love story?
And it's interesting because it's not always presented as a positive. Love in Shakespeare's plays is often a fairly destructive force. It certainly makes people go to some extreme lengths.
Oh yeah, they're gonna dress up as a different gender or a servant. They're gonna put themselves in a position to make this love story happen.
Yeah, Lucentio creates a grand scheme to achieve his love, and it causes a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but I think we have to acknowledge the fact that the conquest of Bianca is really a conquest. As soon as he sees her, he has to have her. He's going to go to whatever lengths he can to gain his conquest.
Yeah, that's how love is presented in Shakespeare's plays. Romeo and Juliet is not about their marriage. It's about Romeo's love for Juliet.
I don't know that I would really call it love. I think I would call it lust.
Exactly. There's a great moment in that play where when Romeo and Juliet meet, they improvise a sonnet together, and it's really beautiful writing, but in the end what we're really seeing is a pickup line. Romeo saw a pretty girl and he broke out his best couplets to try to impress her. Separating love from marriage is something we need to do when we talk about Shakespeare, because love is one thing, marriage is another issue entirely.
Marriage is a business arrangement, truly, at this time.
Yeah, we saw that in the Romeo and Juliet scene earlier, that Lady Capulet wants Juliet to marry Paris, not because she thinks it's going to be a grand loving match, but because it's a good business deal.
Well, yeah, Paris is related to the Prince of Verona. They're marrying their daughter into royalty, essentially.
It's political gain.
And it doesn't have to be about royalty or a queen, or it could be a political match.
Yeah, and I think we understand that. I think we get the idea of a prince being married to the princess of a rival kingdom for the means of securing a treaty. We understand that that's a marriage not based on love. But in Shakespeare's time, quite a lot of marriages followed that same mold. You married to secure a business deal. You married to increase your land holdings. Or, as in Juliet's case, they want to marry her to raise her social status. And there's a whole other aspect to this that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's the dowry. And that's a different concept for a modern audience to look at. In Shakespeare's time, a groom could be expected to be paid to marry someone's daughter.
Okay, but from a historical standard, what's really happening is the idea is that your father is paying the dowry so that your husband has the money to take care of you, so that he can make sure your life stays the exact same as it would have under your father's care. And it's a sign of goodwill between the families that they want a contract between your two families to be beneficial.
You're painting a much nicer picture of this than I do.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there is also the element of it's an enticement to marry someone off. If we take a look a little bit later in Taming of the Shrew, we see Petruchio. And Petruchio has a fairly conventional view of marriage. He's entering into this place to secure the wealthiest wife he can that will get him a strong dowry. Let's take a look.
Tell me now, sweet friend, what happy gale blows you to Padua here from old Verona?
Such wind as scatters young men throughout the world to seek their fortunes farther than at home where small experience grows. But in effusing your Hortensio, thus it stands with me. Antonio, my father, is deceased, and I have thrust myself into this maze, happy to wive and thrive as best I may. Crowns in my purse I have, and goods at home, and so come abroad to see the world.
Petruchio, shall I then wish thee to a shrewd and ill-favored wife? Thou hast thanked me but a little for my counsel. and yet I promise thee she shall be rich, and very rich. But thou'rt too much my friend, and I'll not wish thee upon her.
Signor Hortensio, twixt such friends as we, few words suffice, and therefore, if thou know one rich enough to be Petruchio's wife, as wealth is a burden of my wooing dance, be she as foul as was Florentius' love, as old as Sybil, and as cursed and shrewd as was Socrates and Tippy, or worse, she moves me not, or not removes at least affection's edge in me, and though she chide as loud as the Adriatic Sea, I come to wive it wealthily in Padua. If wealthily, then happily in Padua.
Nay, look you, sir, he tells you flatly what his mind is. Why, give him gold enough and marry him to a puppet, or an aglet baby, or an old trot with ne'er a tooth in her head, though she have as many diseases as 250 horses. Why, nothing comes amiss, so money comes with all.
Petruchio, since we've stepped thus far in, I will continue that I broached in jest. I can, Petruchio, help thee to a wife, with wealth enough, and young and beauteous, brought up as best becomes a gentlewoman. Her only fault, and that is faults enough, is that she is intolerable cursed, froward and shrewd, why, so beyond all measure that if my state were far worse than it is, I would not wed her for a mine of gold.
Hortensio, peace! Thou knowest not gold's effect. Tell me her father's name, 'tis enough, for I will board her though she chide as loud as thunder when the clouds in autumn crack.
Her father's name is Baptista Minola, an affable and courteous gentleman. Her name is Katharina Minola, renowned in Padua for her scolding tongue.
I know her father, though I know not her, and he knew my deceased father well. I will not sleep, Hortensio, until I see her, and therefore let me be thus bold with you, to give you over this first encounter, unless you'll cut me thither.
I pray you, sir, let him go while the humor lasts. As my word, and she knew him as well as I do, she would think scolding would do little good upon him. She may perhaps call him half a score knaves or so. Why, that's nothing. And he'll begin once. He'll rail in his rope tricks. I'll tell you what, sir. She stand him but a little. He'll throw a figure in her face and so disfigure her with it that she shall have no more eyes to see withal than a cat. You know him not, sir.
So there you have it. In Shrew, we see Lucentio as the typical lover, but Petruchio showing us what marriage was really all about. Many of Shakespeare's characters follow what Jacques describes as sudden and quick to quarrel. And when we talk about quarreling, what we're really talking about is dueling. And there are some very specific rules to dueling in Shakespeare's time. And it all has to begin with an offense. That you have to have done something wrong and now you need to make up for it. The duel was a mechanism in order to accomplish that.
I think we see that in the first scene of Romeo and Juliet. When the boys are walking in, they say, "Do you bite your thumb at me, sir?
Yeah, it's a
Are you trying to offend me?"
It's a great thing to bring up because Samson, he says, "I'm going to bite my thumb at them, which is disgrace if they'll bear it." It's deliberate. It's an attempt to cause an offense that could initiate a duel. One interesting bit of language change over time is nowadays, when we say take offense, it means someone has done something that is wrong and it bothered me. In Shakespeare's time, taking offense has a very different meaning. It means that they haven't done anything wrong, but you really want to pick a fight, so you make something up. They didn't give offense. I am taking offense. You know, twist your words to say, hey, you did something that was horribly, horribly offensive to me. You have offended me, you have challenged me to a duel, and I accept. It's a way to say, I want to pick a fight. Watch the scene in Romeo and Juliet. Mercutio and Benvolio start by talking about how sudden and quick to quarrel they actually are. That they're playing a little bit of one-upsmanship of what's the stupidest thing you've gotten into a duel over. And then Tybalt shows up. He does not offer any offense. He's looking for Romeo, and he does want to give offense to Romeo. He does want to challenge him to a duel. But Mercutio takes offense. He twists Tybalt's words around just enough to try to say, you have tried to offend me, so now let's fight. And Benvolio tries to stop it, but Mercutio's a bit of a hothead.
A bit.
A bit.
I pray thee, good Mercutio, let's retire. The day is hot, the capels are abroad, and if we meet, we shall not scape a brawl. For now, these days, is the mad blood stirring.
Come, thou as hot a jack in thy mood as any in Italy, and assume mood to be moody, and assume moody to be moved.
And what to?
Thou wilt quarrel with a man for cracking nuts, having no other reason because thou hast hazel eyes. Thou hast quarrel with a man for coughing in the street, because he'd waken thy dog that lain asleep in the sun. Didst thou not fall out with a tailor for wearing his new doublet before Easter? And yet thou wilt tutor me from quarreling.
And if I were so apt as to quarrel as thou art, any man should buy the fee of my life for an hour and a quarter. By my head, here come the Capulets.
By my heel, I care not.
Gentlemen, good den. A word with one of you.
A word with one of us? Couple with something. Make it a word and a blow.
You shall find me apt enough to that, sir, and you will give me occasion.
Could you not take some occasion without giving?
Mercutio, thou consortest with Romeo.
Consort! What? Does thou make us minstrels? And thou make us minstrels prepare to hear nothing but discords. Here's my fiddlestick. Here's that shall make you dance. Zoons, consort.
We talk here in the public haunt of men. Either retreat unto some private place, or reason coldly of your grievances, or else depart. Here all eyes gaze upon us.
Men's eyes were made to look, and let them gaze. I will not budge for no man's pleasure, I.
Mercutio is spoiling for a fight, and Benvolio says, reason coldly, meaning think this through, don't be so hot-blooded. That's actually what Benvolio was worried about in the last scene. At the very beginning, he's worried that it's so hot outside, it's going to make us feverish and hot-blooded, and he knows that if Mercutio runs across any of the Capulets, he will, in a hot-blooded state, get right into a fight.
And poor Benvolio, he's always trying to stop a fight. But in this scene, he has the loosest cannon of them all.
And if a fight does break out, it's a street brawl. And the prince has banned street brawls on pain of death. So Benvolio is trying to move it into a more formal situation. Get off the streets, get out of the eyes of man, reason coldly, or have this be a formal duel, or we're all in trouble.
Yeah, Benvolio tries to make them make an honest challenge of each other.
Get off the streets, follow the rules. And there are actually rules that make it formal dueling, circumstances which could technically be legal at this point in time. There has to be an offense, there has to be a challenge, and then with that challenge, the person being challenged has to either apologize or accept the duel. It's giving satisfaction. So we have the offense, the challenge, and then you have to set the time, the place, and the stakes. Where are we going to fight? When are we going to fight? And what will result in satisfaction? Is it a fight to the death? Is it a fight to first blood? Is an apology enough? And that's what we're going to see happen coming up next. Tybalt tries really hard to give a formal challenge to Romeo. And Romeo, because of Juliet, is not interested in having this fight at this moment, and Romeo apologizes. He says, I have not offended you, I see you know me not. Tybalt calls him a villain, and that's code. That's dueling code for we want to fight, and we want to fight right now. And when Romeo backs away, it looks to everyone like he's just dishonored himself and committed an act of cowardice. No one gets why the heck he's done that, and Mercutio decides to take matters into his own hand. And he's trying to protect Romeo's honor, but watch how quickly, once Mercutio jumps in, he follows the steps. There is a challenge, time, place, stakes. It all happens real fast. Take a look.
Well, peace be with you, sir. Here comes my man.
But I'll be hanged if you wear your livery. Marry, go before the field, he'll be your follower. Your worship in that sense may call him man.
Romeo, the love I bear thee can afford no better term than this. Thou art a villain.
Tybalt, the reason that I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting. Villain am I none, therefore farewell. I see thou know'st me not.
Boy, this shall not excuse the injuries that thou hast done to me. Therefore, turn and draw.
I do protest, I never injured thee, but love thee better than thou canst devise, till thou shalt know the reason of my love. And so, good Capulet, which name I tender as dearly as mine own, be satisfied.
Oh, calm, dishonorable, vile submission! Audius Acano carries it away. Tybalt, you rat catcher, will you walk?
What wouldst thou have with me?
Why, good king of Cass, nothing but one of your 9 lives.
Oh, I am for you.
Gentle Mercutio, put thy rapier up.
Come, sir, il passado.
Gentlemen, for shame, forbear this outrage. Tybalt, Mercutio, the prince expressly hath forbid this bandying in Verona streets.
So there you see it. We're fighting here, we're fighting now, and we're fighting to the death, or but one of your 9 lives.
Oh yeah, we are seeing this fight happen really fast. It's not slow at all. It is right there, right now. And these men are ready to go. They want to prove their manliness. You have Tybalt, who's a trained fighter, and Mercutio, who's more of a street brawler. And they want to prove their dominance.
And Mercutio's taken a fairly big step. He drew a sword, which could technically be a crime at the time.
And Mercutio is a member of the prince's family. He's deliberately going against the head of his family to defend the honor of his best friend. And he's going to make this right.
And Romeo reacts pretty quickly to his best friend's death. Spoiler alert. So watch what happens when Tybalt returns and see how quickly Romeo too follows the steps of offense, challenge, time, place, stakes. It happens almost immediately.
Oh, Romeo! Brave Mercutio is dead. That gallant spirit hath aspired the clouds which too untimely here did scorn the earth.
This day's black fate on more days doth depend. This but begins the woe others must end.
Here comes the furious Tybalt back again.
He gone in triumph, and Mercutio slain? Away to heaven, respective lenity, and fire-eyed fury be my conduct now. Now, Tybalt, take the villain back again that late thou gavest me. For Mercutio's soul is but a little way above our heads, staying for thine to keep him company. Either thou, or I, or both must go with him.
Thou wretched boy, the disconsortum here, shout with them hence.
This shall determine that.
So, in this time and place, there's a legal difference between a street brawl, which is illegal, and a formal duel, which, depending on the circumstances, could be okay. And it's interesting to note that at this point in Shakespeare's era, the result of a duel could be the, at the time, equivalent of being charged with murder, the equivalent of being charged with manslaughter, or being let off on self-defense, especially dependent on your social status. So, the reason we see these characters in Romeo and Juliet be very explicit about following this code, it's so that they can split hairs and say, hey, I followed the rules, it was a formal duel.
And when it goes to the prince, they do split hairs about how it started, about what happened. And the question is, did Romeo give the sentence to Tybalt that the prince would have given to him anyway?
Yeah. And Tybalt could have pretty legitimately declared self-defense, given how hot-headed Mercutio came in on it.
I mean, he did call him a rat catcher and ask for one of his 9 lives. I'd say that starts a fight.
Yeah, it does. So, if you understand the rules of dueling, a lot of the dialogue in Shakespeare pops in a different way. There are specific rules. Watch for them, and you'll see it shapes how characters decide to act. And you have to be careful with it, or you'll land in front of the justice. So the next stage is the justice. And I find it interesting that in Jaques' speech, it's the first of the ages that is really presented positively. And it creates an interesting problem for Shakespeare, because he wants to talk about rulers at the time. And for Shakespeare, that's dicey territory. You have to be really careful, because you have to have sponsorship. You have to have a patron. And so it might not be the best idea in the world to criticize rulers if you can't do a play without them.
Not only that, with Elizabeth I, he has an even more dangerous card to play because she's a female ruler at the time where there aren't many successful female rulers. So to be powerful, Elizabeth has to surround herself with powerful men who can guide her. And the two that she really leans on are William Cecil and Francis Walsingham. She has these men who advise her, and she needs the support of these noble men and their influence. So Shakespeare would have had to be extremely careful with criticizing the monarchy. In a way, I think the way he chooses to talk about the monarchy without really talking about the monarchy is by using other rulers, and he sees Caesar as the perfect opportunity.
Yet you have to be really careful. Shakespeare would, of course, like any writer, want to talk about issues of the time. And the big issues would be the justice, the rulers, who are the people in charge, what are the politics like? So you can't just write a play that paints the current rulers in a bad light. You'll lose your patronage. He was directly sponsored by Elizabeth I, or at least the head of the court entertainment.
Not only do you have to be careful because of the fact that you could lose your sponsorship, you also have to realize that if you are directly critiquing a monarch, you could lose your head.
So it makes sense to set his criticisms of royalty or rulers or the justice in a very far removed time and place. It gives him some plausible deniability. You know, I'm not talking about Elizabeth or any of Elizabeth's advisors or anything like that. No, this is Caesar. We're talking about those Romans from long ago and far away.
It's clear to me that he is doing just that with Elizabeth herself because she has those two advisors. So he's using Caesar, who also has two men very, very close to him. And I think that I could argue maybe Shakespeare is pointing a little bit at the finger of the two men who are guiding Elizabeth, Walsingham and Cecil. I think that he uses Cassius and Brutus as the perfect scapegoat.
So let's talk about what is the authority of the justice at the time.
I mean, I think Julius Caesar is the perfect example of how too much power can be a really dangerous thing.
Yeah, Shakespeare takes a deep look at all of humanity and examines his flaws. So looking at how we handle power and how we act with power would be an important part for us to examine, in all of the plays.
Well, and I think in this scene, we see how power can really corrupt a soul. It shows how sometimes people can go into something with the best of intentions, but they don't come out of it the same. Brutus and Cassius go into assassinating Caesar with the same idea in mind. We are assassinating him because he is getting too powerful. We can't control him. He's too powerful. However, we come to see in this scene that their reasons for wanting to assassinate Caesar are actually really different.
Yeah, if we look at the tent scene, we see that it's not just examining leaders who have failings. These leaders in the scene are actually debating each other's faults. They're addressing it directly.
Yeah, and we're seeing a difference in these two men, but also a difference in what leadership at the time would look at. You have Brutus, who actually is a really good and noble man who wants to do the right thing, but he's done the wrong thing for all of the right reasons.
Yeah, I had good intentions. I did a bad thing for a good reason.
And Brutus wants to keep that purpose going, whereas Cassius, he's ready to cash in. He has done something bad, but he wants the power. And he realizes that Caesar stands in the way of that idea. So when he goes into assassinating Caesar, it's not really about doing something good. It is about gaining that power. And this isn't really something that is good. And they don't see the justice of what they've done. They see it as revenge for all of Caesar's wrongdoings. So it's simply about enabling each other to have power.
So let's take a look at a couple of the leaders in Shakespeare's plays. This is one of my favorite scenes in all of Shakespeare. I can't wait.
That you have wronged me doth appear in this. You have condemned and noted Lucius Pella for taking bribes here of the Sardians, wherein my letters, praying on his side because I knew the man was slighted off.
You wronged yourself to write in such a case.
In such a time as this, it is not meet that every nice offense should bear his comment.
Let me tell you, Cassius, you yourself are much condemned to have an itching palm, to sell and march your offices for gold to undeservers.
I? An itching palm? You know you are Brutus that speaks this, or by the gods, this speech were else your last.
The name Cassius? Honest is corruption, and chastisement doth therefore hide his head.
Chastisement?
Remember March? The eyes of March remember? Did not great Julius bleed for justice' sake? What villain touched his body, and not for justice? What? Shall one of us that struck the foremost man of all this world, but for supporting robbers, shall we now contaminate our fingers with base bribes and sell the mighty space for our large honors for so much trash as to be grasped thus? I'd rather be a dog and bathe the moon than such a Roman.
Brutus, bait not me. I'll not endure it. You forget yourself to hedge me in. I am a soldier. I, older in practice and abler than yourself to make conditions.
Go to. You are not Cassius.
I am.
I say you are not.
Urge me no more. I shall forget myself. Have mind upon your health and tempt me no farther.
Away, slight man.
Is possible.
Hear me, for I will speak. Must I give way and room to your rash choler? Shall I be frightened when a madman stares?
Oh, ye gods, must I endure all this?
All this, I more. Fret till your proud heart break. Go show your slaves how choleric you are and make your bondmen tremble. By the gods, you shall digest the venom of your spleen, though it do split you.
Is it come to this?
You say you are a better soldier? Let it appear so. Make your vaunting true. And it shall please me well, for mine own part, I shall be glad to learn of noble men.
When Caesar lived, he durst not have moved me.
Peace, peace, you durst not so have tempted him.
I durst not?
No.
What, durst not tempt him?
For your life you durst not.
Do not presume too much upon my love. I may do that I shall be sorry for.
You have done that you should be sorry for. There is no terror, Cassius, in your threats. For I am armed so strong in honesty that they pass by me as the idle wind, which I respect not. I did send to you for certain sons of gold, which you denied me. For I can raise no money by any vile means, by heaven. I'd rather drop my heart blood for Draspus than to wring from the hard hands of peasants or vile trash by any indirection I did send to you, which you denied me. Was that done like Cassius? Should I have answered Caius Cassius so? When Marcus Brutus grows so covetous to lock such rascal counters from his friends, be ready, gods, when all your thunderbolts dash from to pieces.
I denied you not.
You did.
I did not. He was but a fool that brought my answer back. Brutus hath rived my heart. A friend should bear his friend's infirmities, but Brutus makes mine greater than they are.
I do not, till you practice them on me.
You love me not.
I do not like your faults.
A friendly eye could never see such faults.
A flatterer's would not, though they do appear as huge as high Olympus.
So Jaques gives us this idea that all men who are older either become one of two things. You become a mentor or you become a fool. Polonius is obviously a mentor. He's a proud father.
It's an interesting moment in these 7 ages of man because it's kind of a transitional one. We have the justice, where someone who is a mature ruler is being shown, and then we have old age. And in between, we have this age, where you have aged past your ability to be a leader, but you still have all of your faculties.
Yes, are you going to be someone who will educate others like Polonius, or are you going to become a fool? But Polonius shows us this really great example of a mentor, especially when it comes to his son. He blesses his son over and over and over again.
He gives, honestly, a really good string of advice, even by modern standards. He's sending him off with advice that I would be happy to take to this day.
He says, "To thine own self be true." If you're going to use a Shakespeare quote, that is probably one of the first ones you're going to find. But the way he speaks to his son is so moving, I think, because he sees his son as the future. He believes his son is destined to do great things.
Yeah, we're looking at several characters in kind of a transitioning age. You know, Polonius is aging towards old age and leaving the age of the justice, whereas his son is now moving in to become the justice. So I see a lot of this scene as mentorship to who will become the next justice. We see just that shift, that generational shift.
I agree. But I think one thing we have to talk about is the contrast that comes whenever he's talking to his son versus how he's talking to his daughter. He mentors his son in this loving, sweet way. But when he's talking to his daughter, he kind of talks to her like she's still a child.
Yeah, he treats her almost like an infant.
I think Ophelia is, with Ophelia, he's trying to make his intentions very clear. He is saying, stay away from Hamlet.
This loops back to our conversation about the lover. So what Polonius is worried about, I think, is that he sees Hamlet as wanting love from Ophelia, and he worries Ophelia thinks that Hamlet wants to marry Ophelia. So he's saying, stay away from him because you can't marry Hamlet.
Yeah, and I think he also presents this idea of courting. What is courting supposed to be like? And he's really trying to school his daughter on what courting is and how it's supposed to be versus what he sees Hamlet doing. We also see a clear obedience in Ophelia.
Yeah, it really is. I'm glad you pointed out the contrast between Laertes and Ophelia, because he's being a mentor in very different ways. We see Laertes being groomed to be a leader. Here's good advice. Go off into the world, continue the family line, you're going to be a great man. And at the same time, Ophelia, listen, boys will be boys, stay away from Hamlet.
But he's still being a caring father. He's giving his daughter knowledge, truly.
Let's take a look.
Yet here, Laertes, aboard for shame. My blessing with thee. In these few precepts in thy memory, look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought to act. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy rich, not gaudy, for apparel oft proclaims the man. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and a friend, and borrowing dulleth the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst be false to any man. Now, farewell. My blessing season this in thee.
Most humbly do I take my leave, my lord.
The time invest you. Go, your servants tend.
Farewell, Ophelia, and remember well what I have told you.
'Tis in my memory locked, and you yourself shall keep the key of it.
Farewell.
What is Ophelia he hath said to you?
So please you, something touching the Lord Hamlet.
'Tis told me, he hath very oft of late giving private time, and you yourself have your audience been most free and bounteous. What is between you? Give me up the truth.
He hath, my lord, of late made many tenders of his affection to me.
Affection? You speak like a green girl, unsifted in such perilous circumstance. Do you believe these tenders, as you call them?
I do not know, my lord, what I should think.
Mary, I will teach you. Think yourself a baby, that you tend these tenders for true pay, which are not sterling. Tender yourself more dearly.
My lord, he hath importuned me with love in honorable fashion.
Aye, fashion you may call it. Go to.
And hath given countenance to his speech, my lord, with almost all the holy vows of heaven.
Aye, springs to catch woodcocks. I do know when the blood burns, how prodigal the soul ends the tongue vows. These blazes, daughter, give me more light than heat, extinct in both, even in their promise, as it is a making you must not take from fire. From this time, be something scanter of your maiden presence. Set your entreatments at a higher rate than a command to parle. And this is for all. I would not, in plain terms, have you so slander any moment leisure as to give words or talk to the Lord Hamlet. Look to it, I charge you, come your ways.
I shall obey, my lord.
So I think you're right. Polonius is being a good father. It's easy to fault him for the difference between how he speaks to his son and his daughter, but he is doing the right thing. He's trying to have his son become a great leader, and he's trying to protect his daughter's reputation.
Absolutely, and there is a clear love for both of his children here, and that's not always the case in Shakespeare's plays.
Yeah. Well, with characters this age, let's take a look, because Polonius still has all his faculties. He's still able to be in control, he's still able to take care of himself, but he has his children, he has heirs that are going to take over. He's in a wealthy family, and he's still connected to a royal house. Let's contrast that with Falstaff, our true pantaloon. Falstaff is at probably around the same age, but he doesn't have an income. He doesn't have a means to support himself. And at this point in time, that's a problem because he's about to become a burden.
Agreed. And he talks about this idea of him being this great knight and presents this idea that now he is this soldier who has aged past being a soldier. And what does he do after that? I don't know that I would have called him a great knight, but he presents himself that way, so I'm going to give him that.
Yeah, but he knows he's getting older. As Jaques describes, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank. That now that he's aged, he has aged past being this hugely muscled person that he probably never really was. But he has no real income, no means to get an income or support himself, and he can see on the horizon an inability to be self-sufficient. So he's in trouble. I mean, this is a comedy, and it's a lot of fun, but there is one undercurrent that at this age, the sixth age, the lean and slippered pantaloon, there's a problem if you're on your own.
So what do you do if you don't have the means to support yourself? You marry rich.
Yeah. And Falstaff hedges his bets. He woos two women at the same time, and even uses the exact same letter to woo both of them. It doesn't go well for him.
Oh no, they have fun at his expense.
Oh yeah, let's watch.
Have I caught thee, my heavenly jewel? Why now let me die, for I have lived long enough. This is the period of my ambition. Oh, this blessed hour.
Oh, sweet Sir John.
Mistress Ford, I cannot cog, I cannot prate, Mistress Ford. Now shall I sin in my wish. I would thy husband were dead. I'll speak it before the best lord. I would make thee my lady.
I, your lady, Sir John. Alas, I should be a pitiful lady.
Let the court of France show me such another. I see how thine eye would emulate the diamond, and thou hast the right arched beauty of the brow, that becomes the ship tire, the tire valiant, or any tire of the Venetian admittance.
A plain kerchief, Sir John. My brows become nothing else, nor that well neither.
By the Lord, thou art a tyrant to say so. Thou wouldst make an absolute courtier, and the firm fixture of thy foot gives an excellent motion to thy gait in a semicircled farthingale. I see what thou wert, if fortune thy foe were not. Nature thy friend. Come, thou canst not hide it.
Oh, believe me, there is no such thing in me.
What made me love thee? Let that persuade thee that there's something extraordinary in thee. Come, I cannot cog and say thou art this and that, like many of these lip-sing hawthorn buds that come like women in men's apparel and smell like butler's brewery in simple times. I cannot, but I love thee, none but thee, and thou deservest it.
Do not betray me, sir. I fear you love Mistress Page.
Thou mightst as well say I like to walk by the counter gate, which is as hateful to me as the reek of a lime kill.
Well, heaven knows how I love you, and You shall one day find it.
Keep that in mind. I'll deserve it.
Nay, I must tell you so you do, or else I could not be in that mind.
Mistress Ford! Mistress Ford! Here's Mistress Page at the door, sweating and blowing and looking wildly, and would need speak with you presently.
She shall not see me. I will escort me behind the arras.
Oh, pray you do so. She's a very tattling woman.
So the wives lead Falstaff along on a merry little game. They embarrass him like crazy, but in the end, they take him in, which is a win for Falstaff. That's basically what he was after. So he's being taken care of. He was a soldier. Probably not the best of soldiers, but he has aged past his ability to be a soldier. And in Shakespeare's time, there was something of an expectation of perhaps dying in the field.
Well, that was considered a glorious death. If you were a soldier, that's how you wanted to go out, so that you could be remembered as a hero.
Yeah. Well, and Shakespeare writes this character of Falstaff who is a soldier but was never going to graduate up to being a general. He had to be a soldier, and now he has aged past being a soldier. It's a beloved character in a funny play, but it points to a kind of dark truth about the Elizabethan era, that once you have aged to a certain point, old age is not considered an accomplishment or a good thing. You are now a burden.
I think that's one of the reasons why Shakespeare is so transcendent, because he does a really good job of saying something very profound in a way that you might think it's funny, but like you're saying, if you look a little bit deeper, there's a deeper meaning to his words.
Yeah.
King Lear is a very, very different man than most of the men we consider Shakespeare's leading men. And most of that has to do with his age. He's not a young man.
No, but it's worth noting that the character of King Lear is rather famously often portrayed by someone who was once a leading man. So if you've been cast as Romeo, King Lear may be in your future just in another 20 or 30 or 40 years.
And even though Lear's age is never explicitly given to us, when we see Lear performed now, we see him as this very much older man. But actually, his age is a little bit more widened. There's a little bit more range to it, because in Elizabeth's age, being 40 would have been considered old. So there's actually more range in that role than people give credit for.
I mean, 40 wouldn't be that old. I'm just saying I turned 41 tomorrow.
Okay, I'm sorry. Somebody
right.
has a birthday coming up. Sorry.
So, but I like that you talked about expanding and contracting the age, because in all of these, from way back in the beginning when we said we're going to talk about age a lot, Shakespeare kind of contracts age, or at least Shakespeare's era looks at a contraction of age. You know, you're an adult at 12 to 15. You're middle-aged in your middle 20s, and yes, 40 would be old.
But King Lear isn't really tied down. He could be played as 40 and it would be pretty historically accurate, but his age is important. Age is really important in this show. I would argue it's a driving force in this whole entire play.
I agree.
But Lear has decided he doesn't want to be king anymore. He's decided he wants to crawl unburdened toward death. Shakespeare picked that word crawl on purpose.
Yeah, it's second childishness. So just as we were talking about with Falstaff's concern about approaching old age, Lear is there. He is now a burden, if we want to go down that route. Some of his daughters certainly treat him that way, but he's past the point where he can support himself, and he is basically a child again, except unlike being a child where people would support you because of your ability to grow into something that could perhaps support them, old age is the childishness you don't come back from.
Yeah, no. But I also think, historically speaking, it's really important to talk about what's going on in England at this time. So in 1606, when Lear was published, King James I of England had just turned 40 years old, like somebody else I know. So this would have been considered old. It's entirely possible Lear is a stab at James and his age, especially because some of King Lear King Lear's arguments that he has with Kent are actually really similar to James I's interactions with Peter Wentworth.
It's an interesting gambit from Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's also interesting to me that Edmund and Lear kind of play foils to one another. Lear is this aging medieval man who is coming to his end, while Edmund is on the rise. He is a new man. He's a Renaissance man. He can kind of do a little bit of everything, and he's got that Machiavellian kind of mind frame. He's willing to do anything. So we see this idea of the medieval age ending and the Renaissance and this Machiavellian idea of leadership really rising at this time.
But I think we also have to talk about Lear's mental state. Now, our modern eyes would look at Lear and we would almost immediately associate what's going on with him as Alzheimer's or dementia. In fact, I would argue that it's kind of hard for our worldview to look at Lear as anything but that as it's happening. So it's not just that he is becoming old and frail, his mind is going too.
Yeah, no, and it's not any clearer than in The Storm. No. And it's that idea of this childishness coming back to us, because it becomes clear as you get older, you start to lose a lot of the stuff that made you an individual when you were younger. You're suddenly a child again, and you're depending on people. And in Lear's case, he's depending on his daughters, who he has never really truly leaned on before.
Well, and then there's also the fool, who's an interesting character. In this era, the fool is the one person in court who's allowed to insult the king. The fool can say basically anything and get away with it, and that's kind of a safety valve for society, that, okay, there's someone who can say this. Now, the fool might get beaten, but he doesn't risk losing his head. And in this play, the fool is one of the smartest people in the room and fiercely loyal to Lear, one of the few who is. The fool stays with him and tries to guide him along. And even when we encounter this terrifying storm, the fool stays there. And we see Lear confront the storm very much like a child. He tries to shout the storm down. He tries to command the storm with his royal power.
But Lear's anger really isn't at the storm. It's about the fact that he is realizing slowly more and more that he is losing control of his mental faculties. He's losing everything that has made him him.
Well, and you bring up the idea of the medieval man. If we want to get really fancy about it, at this point in time, we would look at that king as a divine right ruler, and the king and the land are one. So it's not just that Lear happened to wander out into a storm. Because Lear is in mental distress, there is a storm. The storm is reflecting the king. Lear is the storm.
Blow winds and crack your cheeks. Rage, blow! You thought, sulphurous and thought-executing fires, bond couriers of oak-cleaving thunderbolts, singe my white head! And thou, all shaking thunder, strike flat the thick rotundity of the world! Crack nature's molds! All germane spill at once, it makes a grateful man!
Oh, Nuncle! Court holy water in a dry house is better than this rainwater out a door. Good Nuncle in, ask thy daughter's blessing. Here's a night, favors neither wise men nor fools.
Rumble thy belly full, spit fire, spout rain, nor rain, wind, thunder, fire are my daughters. I tax not you, you elements, with unkindness. I never gave you kingdom, called you children. You owe me no subscription. Then let fall your horrible pleasure. Here I stand, your slave, a poor, infirm, weak, and despised old man. But yet I call you servile ministers, who will, with two pernicious daughters, join your high-engendered battle against a head so old and white as this. Oh, 'tis foul.
He that has a house to put set in has a good headpiece.
Who's there? Where?
Mary, here's grace in a codpiece. That's a wise man and a fool.
Alas, sir, are you here? Things that love the night love not such nights as these. The wrathful sky gallow the very wanderers of the dark and make them keep their cave. Since I was a man, such sheets of fire, such bursts of horrid thunder, such groans of roaring wind and rain I never remembered to have heard. Man's nature cannot carry the affections nor the fear.
Let the great gods that keep this dreadful putter o'er our heads find out their enemies now. Tremble, thou wretch, that hast within thee undivulged crimes, unwhipped of justice. Hide thee, thou bloody hand, thou perjured, and thou simular of virtue that art incestuous. Caitiff, to pieces shake, that under covert and convenient seeming has practiced on man's life. Close pent-up guilt, ride your concealing continence, and cry these dreadful summoners' grace. I am a man more sinned against than sinning.
Alack, bareheaded! Gracious, my lord, hard by here is a hovel. Some friendship will it lend you against the tempest. Repose you there, while I to this hard house, more harder than stone whereof 'tis raised, which even but now, demanding after you, denied me to come in. Return, and force their scanted courtesy.
The wits begin to turn. Oh, come on, my boy. How dost, my boy? Art cold. I am cold myself. Where is this straw, my fellow? The art of our necessities is strange and can make vile things precious. Come, your hovel. Fool and knave, I have one part in my heart that's sorry yet for thee.
He that has in a little tiny wit, with hi-ho the wind and the rain, must make content with his fortune's fit. Though the rain it raineth every day.
True, boy. Come, bring us to this hovel.
Seven Ages of Man, a whole life in one speech.
Yeah. I mean, some of Shakespeare's words and his meanings don't really make sense to us anymore. But the interpretations of Shakespeare are what makes Shakespeare so interesting. Shakespeare means different things to different people.
Yeah. And who knows how they'll look at Shakespeare in another 200 years.
I mean, that's why Shakespeare's work is so transcendent.
This was fun, Maddie. Thanks for this. I think we all needed it. Yeah.
Ah, the ghost light.
Yep.
So, do you believe the superstitions?
Which one? That the ghosts need light to perform on the stage when we're gone, or that the ghost light scares the ghosts away from the stage?
Either one, yeah.
I think that when you look at all of the energy and passion that we put into plays, when you look at all the blood, sweat, and tears that we have to go through to get a show on the road, all of that for something that's just a memory. Once we put away the sets and the costumes, and the actors move on to the next show, all that's left is a memory. So all of that passion to create a memory, and we call it live theater. So it's a memory that lives.
That's not really an answer.
I'm saying maybe it's not that crazy to think that there's a spirit to this place.
Yeah. Thank you for this. It was good to see you.
Good to see you too.
You need any help?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Get you later. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep.